It wrapped up. It lasted just 33 minutes. Statements from both the president of Mexico and Donald Trump. Let me briefly summarize what they had to say. It was a cordial, cooperative mood, and that came across from both sides. President Nieto started it off by saying the border must be transformed into an asset. The flow of weapons and money into Mexico must be stopped. That was a corrosive thing in Mexico, he said. And again, he wants to make the border more efficient and safer. It was a very cordial statement, but firm, from President Nieto. Then came Donald Trump, who started with what a great honor it was for him to be in Mexico meeting with Mexico's president. He then went on to 5 principles, 5 goals, I should say, that he came up with. Number 1, end illegal immigration. Number 2, secure the border, and it is a sovereign right, he said, to build a barrier or a wall. He used the word. Number 3, end the flow of guns and drugs in both directions. 4, improve NAFTA, but keep industry in our hemisphere. That's both Mexico and in the United States. Number 5, keep manufacturing wealth in our hemisphere, Mexico and the United States. Work together for mutual good. Sheriff Paul Babu, sheriff of Pinal County in Arizona, is with us. He's been listening to all of this, and so too is former State Department official David Tafuri. Sheriff, to you first, is Donald Trump helped or hurt by what you just heard?
I thought this was fantastic. To be quite honest with you, in law enforcement, oftentimes we try to de-escalate a lot of the emotions that go on, and there's been a lot of rhetoric, a lot of anger justified here in the United States, and to see Donald Trump in this capacity acting as a world leader, I thought was fantastic. He was not only respectful, he was very thoughtful in his intentions for our country, mutual respect, also respecting the sovereignty of both nations, understanding we both need security, and let's work together to achieve that. So this was a huge win for Donald Trump and a huge win for our relations.
David Tafuri, how do you see it?
Well, I think it was good and bad for Trump. You know, on the bad side, this is a massive capitulation by Donald Trump on his policy on Mexico. He had said before he wanted to rip up NAFTA. Now he's talking about some modest amendments to NAFTA in cooperation with the Mexican president. He said he's going to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. But you just heard him admit he didn't even raise the issue of making Mexico pay for it. A complete capitulation. He says he wants to deport.
Wait, David, that is not a capitulation if he doesn't actually discuss paying for the wall with Mexico's president. That's not a capitulation, is it?
In all due respect, that is a fundamental part of how he has talked about Mexico and the wall. He has said he will make Mexico pay for it. He now goes to Mexico, drops in for a visit, has a chit-chat, and never even mentions it. It was a central part of his policy on Mexico. He's completely capitulated on it, completely pivoted on it. It's an act of desperation.
Because he didn't talk about it, you say it is a capitulation. What do you make of that, Sheriff?
Well, that's not the case. What I really enjoyed is the president of Mexico pointing out, and he's right, that there have been guns coming from the United States down to Mexico, fueling this mass murders and the destabilization of Mexico. And lo and behold, we find out that it was President Obama and his former Attorney General Eric Holder with Fast and Furious 2,000 weapons that we participated in arming the most violent criminals in the Western Hemisphere, the drug cartels. So he's got a point there.
David, Hillary Clinton is not there. Whether she goes to meet Mexico's president in the future, we don't know, but she was invited, but she wasn't there today. Donald Trump stole the political initiative here, didn't he? There he is. Everybody's covering this. He's right out front. He's taken the political initiative.
Well, look, there are some positives. He didn't embarrass himself. He gave a decent speech. He stuck to the speech as written, it looks like. He seems to have gotten along well with the president. But let's not ignore that he's completely changed his policy. And for those who support Trump because of his policies on Mexico and who are looking for a much stronger and more forceful policy from Trump on Mexico against immigration, building a wall, making Mexico pay for it, tearing up NAFTA, they don't have that anymore. That's not the Donald Trump we saw today. We saw a completely different Donald Trump, a Donald Trump who's motivated by his sagging poll numbers and trying desperately to make a change in his policy to appeal to Mexicans in the United States.
We do have some video of some protests which took place close to the presidential palace. Again, I believe this is in Mexico City. Protests against Donald Trump. There's a rather limited number of people out there, however. I realize this was a quickly arranged visit, but I think that is the extent of it that we can find on our cameras. You talk about a dozen people. It looks like, Sheriff, that it didn't generate an enormous opposition the way many people thought it would.
Right. And not only that, it's important to note that Mexico is our neighbor. It's Arizona's largest trading partner. America is one of our top. And look, Donald Trump has been a very successful businessman, and he's addressing the top issues for our country. And the president of Mexico said right there, he invited Hillary Clinton. He invited Donald Trump. Donald Trump, even though he has differences in opinion with the leader of Mexico, he went there to his palace in a respectful tone and talked about the issues, outlined carefully the priorities for America. And I think that shows clear leadership.
Stephen Dinan is with us, who's also been watching the joint statement from the from President Nieto and from Donald Trump. Your reaction, please. You watched it all the way through. What do you come away with?
Well, I mean, this was Donald Trump's first foray into statecraft, basically his first major appearance on the world stage as a party leader and possible for a future president. And I think, given that, it went fairly well for him. As your guest said earlier, there were no major mistakes. There's something in diplomacy where you put tough issues off until you absolutely have to deal with them. He said, we didn't deal with who's going to pay for the wall. We talked about the fact that countries are able to have a wall, but we're going to put off the issue of paying for it until later. And the Mexican president came back and said yes, and I affirmed that, I'm here to speak for Mexicans. That's how statecraft happens, and that's how you delay thorny issues and build a relationship, essentially. So I think, it may not have been a home run, but it was a very solid hit for Trump.
I didn't pick up any hostility on either side. I picked up a very cordial, not a cordial relationship, but cordial statements from both sides. David, you'll give that?
Yeah, this was very cordial. It appeared to be very much orchestrated. I think, a deal was worked out on exactly how this would go between the Trump campaign and between the Mexican government. They agreed to do public statements. They agreed to take some questions. So in that sense, it is a victory for Trump in the sense that he could negotiate that successfully on a very short timeline. But you have to, again, look at the change in policy. And in that sense, it's really a win for the Mexican president, because the Trump policy before was very anti-Mexico. Mexican people were very upset about it. And the Mexican president comes away with a big win on policy.
Sheriff, a win for Mexico's president? Comment on that, please.
Look, we wouldn't even be talking about this issue if Donald Trump didn't make it front and center. If Hillary Clinton had her way, we'd continue to have open borders for the next at least 4 years, and all of this crime that's really ravaged both of our countries. So I hail Donald Trump in this regard for showing statesmanship and taking the issues that he's passionate about, that Americans are so frustrated by, that I as a lawman have to deal with these sorts of crimes day in and day out when our job is tough enough. And he's saying we're going to fix it. He can do so diplomatically, and he's doing it today.
Stephen, you report and write on the impact of illegal immigration on the United States. That's your subject. That's your wheelhouse. What do you make about this commitment to, at least from Donald Trump at least, to ending illegal immigration? And the problem must be solved quickly.
Well, obviously it's a really high bar, and we're going to learn tonight exactly the specifics for how he says we're going to get there, and we'll be able to evaluate exactly what he does and how much of an effect that will have. Look, when you're talking about illegal immigration, the big bill that came through the Senate didn't get through Congress overall, but came through the Senate 3 years ago, the Gang of 8 bill, the experts who analyzed that bill said even that, with all of everything it had in there, including legalizing illegal immigrants, apparently shutting down the future flow with extra border security and whatnot, even that would have only solved about 50% of the problem going forward. You'd still have about 50% of the current flow of illegal immigration otherwise. So it's a really tough nut to crack. We're going to learn about Trump's details, but the cooperation of the Mexican government, having them on your side in this, as the Mexican president said, there has been a major shift. Mexico is no longer responsible for the vast majority of these folks, and Mexico having them on your side is very important in getting that done.
Gentlemen, thank you very much to all three of you for being available at such short notice on such a very important issue. We appreciate all of you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.